Jerry Nadler's words cut through the noise like a warning siren. He pointed out something most of the media avoids saying out loud: the overwhelming majority of political violence in America isn't balanced across the spectrum, it comes from one side. Yet instead of accepting that reality, leaders twist tragedy into a weapon, using it to silence dissent and weaken oversight. The exchange with FBI Director Patel made that crystal clear. Nadler opened with a moment that forced everyone in the room to lean forward. He reminded Patel of the killing of Charlie Kirk, a moment that shook the political world. In its aftermath, a statement was made that violence and murder were the tragic consequences of demonizing opponents day after day, year after year. On the surface it sounded like a plea for civility. But beneath the surface was a tactic: shift blame away, cast yourself as the victim, and use the grief of one tragedy to justify a crackdown on speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Director Patel. In the wake of the tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump said, quote, "Violence and murder are the tragic consequences of demonizing those with whom you disagree, day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible," close quote. I would note for the record that Donald Trump has famously demonized practically every person he has ever disagreed with, and therefore, using his own logic, he has put their lives at risk. I should know, about 2 weeks ago, when I announced my decision not to my decision not to seek re-election, many people on both sides of the aisle, including the chairman, offered me well wishes and thanked me for my service. Donald Trump, on the other hand, took to Truth Social to call me a, quote, "psychopathic nut job," among other things. Yesterday, I received a threatening note filled with anti-Semitic comments and hateful attacks that mimicked some of the same language used by the president. I am sure many of us on this committee face similar threats every day. We have seen political assaults on both the left and the right. The attack on Charlie Kirk, the attempted assassination of the president, the murder of the Democratic Speaker of the Minnesota House, the assault on Paul Pelosi, and the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, for example. Director Patel, do you agree that there is political violence from both the left and the right?
There's too much political violence.
Do you agree, yes or no, that there's violence?
There is too much political violence based on ideologies from either side.
From either side, okay. Are you aware of the study by the Cato Institute, a well-known conservative group, that found that 69% of the violence is from the right?
I'm not familiar with that study.
You're not familiar, okay. I would commend it to you. Are you aware the administration has threatened to use violence as an excuse to crack down on liberty and freedom of speech?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
Are you aware the administration has threatened to use violence as an excuse to crack down on liberty and freedom of speech?
Nobody at the FBI is doing that.
I didn't ask you about the FBI, I said the administration.
I speak for the FBI.
I would like to enter the record an article from today's New York Times titled, "Trump Invokes Kirk's Killing and Justifying Measures to Silence Opponents." In the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing, President Trump and his allies have laid out a broad plan to target liberal groups, monitor speech, revoke visas, and designate certain groups as domestic terrorists. I ask unanimous consent to insert this into the record. Thank you. Politicizing the murder of Charlie King to go after free speech is not a legacy I believe Charlie King would have wanted. Moving on, I want to address another topic. The FBI has traditionally played a key role in prosecuting public officials for corruption. But I fear that at a time when the president is accepting planes from Qatar for his post-presidential personal use, issuing pardons to major donors, and personally profiting from the office of the presidency, the FBI may be abandoning its commitment to investigating public corruption. Since its creation in the wake of the Watergate scandal, the Public Integrity Section has been one of the crown jewels of the Department of Justice, investigating and prosecuting corruption among the nation's public officials and acting as a key safeguard against politicized prosecutions. This section's work has been supported by an elite squad in the FBI devoted specifically to rooting out corruption. But according to reports, the Public Integrity Section has now been decimated, and the FBI's Public Corruption Squad has been disbanded. I would like to submit for the record a New York Times article entitled, "FBI Dismantles Elite Public Corruption Squad." I ask unanimous consent. Thank you. These actions are an invitation to corrupt politicians to break the law, since they know that the government is asleep at the switch. Last month, Senator Warren and I, along with dozens of other members of Congress, wrote to you and Attorney General Bondi expressing grave concern over your decision to effectively legalize corruption and to politicize prosecutorial decisions. And he asks unanimous consent to enter this letter into the record. Thank you. I don't have time today to walk through all your questions, all of our questions and concerns, but will you commit to answering this letter in short order so that we can understand what factors led to this decision and how it has impacted the ability to hold corrupt officials accountable?
I will review your letter with my team and respond as soon as I can.
You will respond. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director, for being here. I appreciate.
Nadler seized on that contradiction. He pointed out that the very same voices claiming to denounce demonization are also the ones who spend every day labeling opponents with vicious slurs, mocking their faith, their ethnicity, their families, and their integrity. If you follow that logic, then those words have put targets on people's backs. And Nadler knew exactly how dangerous that reality had become because he lived it. Just 2 weeks earlier, when he announced that he wouldn't seek re-election, Nadler received bipartisan well-wishes from colleagues across the aisle. But on social media, he was hit with a storm of insults, psychopathic nutjob among them, amplified by the highest levels of power. Within days, his office received a threatening note filled with anti-Semitic slurs and chilling language that mirrored those same online attacks. Nadler made it clear, threats don't emerge in a vacuum, they follow a pattern. The words of leaders echo, grow louder in toxic corners of the internet, and eventually spill over into real violence. So Nadler pressed Patel, "Do you agree there is political violence on both the left and the right?" Patel's answer was telling. He repeated a safe, rehearsed line, "There is too much political violence." He never broke it down, never acknowledged where most of it comes from, never admitted what the data shows. Nadler asked again. Patel gave the same vague answer. This wasn't just evasion, it was a refusal to confront the core truth. And then Nadler dropped the receipts. He cited a study not from a liberal think tank but from the Cato Institute, a well-known conservative group. Their research showed that nearly 70% of political violence in America comes from the right. That number wasn't spun out of partisan talking points. It came from data, from case studies, from hard evidence. Almost 3/4 of attacks motivated by politics didn't happen in balance. They came from one side, fueled by extremism, conspiracies, and hate. Think about that. From Charlottesville, where torch-bearing mobs chanted about replacing minorities, to January 6, where rioters stormed the Capitol to stop the certification of an election, the pattern has been unmistakable. Attacks on synagogues, shootings at black churches, threats against judges and lawmakers, these weren't random. They were part of an escalating trend of right-wing extremism spilling into violence. And yet instead of owning up to it, powerful figures try to muddy the waters with the false claim that both sides are equally to blame. That's the tactic Nadler was exposing. When the facts are too damning, the strategy becomes deflection. Pretend that violence is equally distributed. Pretend that data doesn't exist, and use tragedy as a political tool. The killing of Charlie Kirk was a moment of deep national pain, but instead of focusing on unity, it was seized upon as a justification for sweeping new powers. Plans were rolled out to monitor liberal organizations, revoke visas, label opponents as terrorists, and put restrictions on speech. This wasn't about protecting people, it was about controlling them. It was a way to weaponize grief, to transform mourning into a political crackdown. But Nadler wasn't done. He shifted the focus to another area just as alarming, corruption. He reminded Patel that the FBI had once played a central role in prosecuting corrupt officials, Republican and Democrat alike. The Public Integrity section of the Department of Justice, born out of the Watergate era, was designed as a safeguard. It existed to ensure that no politician, no matter how powerful, could escape accountability. And supporting that effort was an elite squad inside the FBI, investigators who specialized in rooting out corruption at the highest levels. For decades, this team uncovered bribes, backroom deals, and abuses of power. It was a crown jewel of accountability, and then it was gone. Reports revealed that the FBI's Public Corruption Squad had been quietly dismantled. The unit tasked with protecting democracy from corrupt officials had been gutted. Nadler drove the point home: if the watchdog is taken off the leash, who's left to hold politicians accountable? At the same time, corruption wasn't just theoretical. Nadler laid out real-world examples: luxury planes from Qatar accepted for personal use, pardons handed out to major donors, profits flowing directly into personal pockets while in office. These weren't whispered scandals hidden in shadows, they were visible in plain sight, the kind of behavior the FBI used to prosecute but now seemed unwilling, or unable, to confront. To underscore the seriousness, Nadler entered into the record a letter he and Senator Elizabeth Warren had signed along with dozens of other members of Congress. That letter accused Patel and Attorney General Bondi of effectively legalizing corruption. By dismantling the very unit designed to police it, they had left the door wide open for abuse. The message sent to corrupt politicians was clear: the referees are gone, play as dirty as you want. And here's where the danger deepens. Political violence and corruption aren't separate issues, they're intertwined. Violence creates fear, silences dissent, and keeps people in line. Corruption ensures those in power profit from that silence and stay untouchable. Put together, they form a dangerous cycle that eats away at democracy. Nadler's questioning wasn't just about statistics or bureaucratic restructuring, it was about how a nation slowly drifts toward authoritarianism when watchdogs are dismantled and truths are buried. Consider the sequence. First, leaders refuse to acknowledge where violence is coming from, blurring responsibility with vague platitudes. Next, they exploit tragedy to expand control, justifying crackdowns on speech and opposition. Finally, they weaken or dismantle oversight mechanisms, ensuring that corruption can grow unchecked. Each step reinforces the next, building a system where intimidation and profiteering replace accountability and transparency. Nadler's words should serve as a wake-up call. Democracy doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment, it erodes piece by piece. It erodes when officials dodge simple truths about violence. It erodes when leaders weaponize grief to silence critics. It erodes when anti-corruption squads are dismantled, leaving no one to catch those who abuse power. And it erodes most of all when the public accepts these changes as normal. That's why this hearing mattered. It wasn't just political theater. It revealed the infrastructure of a strategy: deny the roots of violence, use tragedy to seize control, and hollow out accountability. And the stakes couldn't be higher, because once corruption is normalized and political violence is excused, reversing course becomes nearly impossible. The irony is that history has already warned us. Watergate created the very institutions now being dismantled. They were built to prevent a repeat of unchecked abuse of power. Yet here we are, watching those safeguards stripped away, replaced with rhetoric that pretends both sides are equally guilty, while one side consolidates control. The question Nadler posed wasn't just rhetorical, it was a test. Would Patel acknowledge reality, or would he play it safe? His refusal to answer directly was more revealing than if he had simply said yes or no. It showed the cost of loyalty to power over loyalty to truth. And it showed how fragile accountability becomes when those tasked with upholding it refuse to speak plainly. For viewers, the lesson is sobering. Political violence and corruption aren't abstract talking points, they shape daily life. They decide whether threats against lawmakers are investigated or ignored. They determine whether foreign gifts to leaders are scrutinized or buried. They influence whether tragedies are mourned or weaponized. And they decide whether democracy functions as a safeguard or just a slogan. So the challenge falls not only on politicians but on citizens. Pay attention to the patterns. Recognize when both sides' rhetoric is used to dodge hard truths. Notice when oversight units are dismantled under the cover of bureaucracy. Understand that when violence and corruption work together, they create a system where accountability dies quietly, not with a bang but with a shrug. Nadler's questioning left us with one final question that lingers. When the overwhelming threat is coming from one side, will we have the courage to confront it? Because denial won't protect us, silence won't protect us, only accountability, facts and vigilance can. And if we fail to recognize that now, the next tragedy won't just be twisted into another crackdown, it will be another step toward losing the democracy we claim to cherish. That's why this matters. This isn't about partisanship. It's about the future of governance itself. Will oversight stand, or will corruption and violence define the rules? Nadler sounded the alarm. The question now is whether the rest of us are willing to listen, to act, and to demand something better before it's too late.